Good evening. My name is Vaitheeswaran, and Satish over the years has become a very good friend. Started speaking at the talk 2 years back, and I think this is probably the fourth or the fifth time multiple cities that I've had the pleasure and privilege of participating in his events. I certainly remember Chennai and Coimbatore, two places where I visited. As I was sharing with somebody else, I think I'm quite impressed at his ability to put together relevant audiences on relevant topics. Today he said I must speak about being an entrepreneur again. And again, of course, relates to the brand name of the drinks that we recently launched in Bangalore. But I'm not going to speak about the drinks because this is not about that. I'm going to speak about being an entrepreneur again and again. I think for all of us, how many of you here in this room are entrepreneurs? Okay, so that's almost everybody. You know, people talk of things that are very addictive, right? Alcohol, sugar, tobacco, drugs. I think one of the most addictive things is being an entrepreneur. Because once you become an entrepreneur, irrespective of whatever the outcome is, irrespective of whether it ends well, whether it's a big success or a moderate success or a big failure or a moderate failure, you're bitten by a bug and it never lets you go. So after that, it's almost impossible to do anything except becoming an entrepreneur. And you know, I see many people who are saying, oh, he's a serial entrepreneur. And how do you become a serial entrepreneur? In my view, I think becoming an entrepreneur is very difficult. Once you become an entrepreneur, you're essentially a serial entrepreneur. Either you start business that continues for a long time, or you do multiple businesses and become a serial entrepreneur. So, because you're bitten by a bug of being an entrepreneur, becoming a serial entrepreneur is actually fairly simple. And since all of you here in this room are essentially running your own businesses, you will understand what I'm saying. When I finished my previous venture in 2013, it was an e-commerce company, and I tried my hand at consulting. I consulted with fairly large companies, the Tata Group, Deloitte, Diageo. I mentored a bunch of startups. I even tried my hand at a job, tried working for somebody else. Somebody approached me and said, "Well, you started this company, it's a great idea, we're putting some money. Would you like to be the non-founding CEO?" I tried everything. None of them have the excitement of being your own entrepreneur. It just doesn't work. So I said, forget it. Let's try and see if we can do something. In between, I also wrote a book. The book I wrote, I started writing this in 2015. I finished in 2017. The book is called Failing to Succeed. And even the book, I think I approached it as a startup. So sometime back, before I announced my latest venture, I was speaking at an event, and somebody said, "How come you haven't done another startup?" And I told them I have. My book is a startup. And for those of you who have experience of writing and publishing a book, it's actually as challenging, if not more challenging, than doing a startup. If anything, it's a little bit more difficult because in a startup, at least you have the advantages of having co-founders. Co-authors are not very easy to do, so you essentially do it on your own. In a startup, you are able to do a whole lot of stuff. You can imagine you can try different things, different domains, different business ideas. a book gets fairly restricted because you already determined what topic you want to do. And the most important thing is, it's also a very lonely exercise, but it is still a startup. Even the act of fundraising for a book is like a startup. When I do a startup, I go to an investor and say, put money in my business. When you write a book, essentially the publisher is putting the money because they're publishing the book, hoping the book will sell. So, even when I was not doing a startup, but writing a book, I was actually doing a startup. And recently, I'm back doing another startup, and which is called again, because in a sense, it encapsulates what we all are. Either we are not an entrepreneur, or very quickly we all become serial entrepreneurs. A few quick things. Who's an entrepreneur really? And it's a question that people ask me. I like talking about it. Is an entrepreneur somebody who solves problem, hires people, builds team, raises money, creates business? I think those are the lesser important details. To me, an entrepreneur must possess two very, very critical qualities. And if you don't have them, then you're not ready to be an entrepreneur. And if you have them, then I think you're probably fit to be an entrepreneur. Those two qualities are, first, you need to be extremely brave. And second, you need to be extremely stupid. Right? Because most of us have the pleasure and the privilege of working for somebody else. It's a steady job. You get a salary on time. You get increments every year. Life is going on. Despite all of that, you want to leave and go fight, compete with somebody using your own resources. You need to be brave. And again, let me repeat, you have a job, you have a salary, you have increments, you have nice life. You want to leave all of that and go start something on your own. You must be extremely stupid. So, if you're not brave and if you're not stupid, you're not ready to be an entrepreneur. In fact, most people tell me that an entrepreneur is a very courageous person. I think they are, obviously. But to me, the more important quality is being stupid. Because if we go and stand in front of a mirror and ask, saying, am I a brave person? And we're looking for an answer, all of us will get the answer saying yes, because who in this room will say, I'm not a brave person? We all believe we are a brave person. So you ask the mirror, am I brave? The mirror will say yes. But the important question we need to ask and listen carefully is, am I stupid? I'm happy to say that almost everybody in this room is stupid and brave, right? So am I. Because if you're not brave and stupid, you will be like most people, happily working for somebody else. But if you're an entrepreneur, it doesn't work. You want to work for yourself. You want to do something from scratch. You want to create something from scratch. What are the other qualities that an entrepreneur needs to have to solve problems? What is an entrepreneur? Essentially, an entrepreneur is trying to solve problems. What kind of problems do you solve? A lot of people tell me that you need domain expertise, which means I'm a software engineer. I can solve problems using technology and code. I'm a salesperson. I can help solve problems and use my selling skills to go sell a product or a service that got created. I'm in the chemical industry. I can solve problems related to chemical or processing or manufacturing. I'm in the apparel, fashion industry. I can solve problems related to fashion. But I think that's a very restrictive way of looking at it. I don't think entrepreneurs really are people who are restricted by domains. I think all of us are wired very differently. We are all problem solvers, but I think we solve problems from base principles. And if you don't, my suggestion, my advice to all of you is, don't allow this restriction to stop you. Don't say, I'm a finance person, I will be an entrepreneur in the finance space. I'm a manufacturing person, I will be an entrepreneur in the manufacturing space. I think if you're an entrepreneur, you can solve any problem. I'll give you two of my examples. I started India's first e-commerce company in 1999 when nobody even knew the spelling of e-commerce in India. Right? Nobody even knew what e-commerce was all about. Obviously, neither did we. But we went and started it because the best way to figure out how to do something, how to solve a problem is to actually attempt to solve it and not worry about domain expertise. You have to realize one thing, that if everybody did only things that they knew, nobody would ever do anything fresh. Right? Somebody has to do something for the first time. And entrepreneurs are best equipped to do things for the first time, because a person who's not an entrepreneur can never do things for the first time. So don't allow that restriction to happen. Let me give you my second example. I'm now 56 years old. This January we launched, like I said, a beverages. It's an FMCG product. I have no idea about FMCG. I am clueless. I have no idea. All I know is what FMCG stands for, which is a little better because at least it is better than e-commerce, because I was not even sure whether e-commerce was after E, do you put a hyphen or you don't put a hyphen. I'm a little better here because I know what FMCG stands for, but it doesn't stop us. Because if I don't know something, let's start. The way to do this is very simple. I follow a very simple principle as to how do you go and solve problems in domains outside. Here is a principle that has worked for me very, very effectively, and here's my recommendation to you. Any problem can be solved from base principles if you ask the right questions. And the right questions are essentially 6 questions, which is who, what, when, where, why, how. Whatever is the issue, keep asking those questions, keep asking till you reach a dead end, and you'll get base principles from which any problem can be solved. A very popular phrase that everybody uses is saying, it is not rocket science, right? Everybody says, it's not rocket science. Meaning, if it's not rocket science, I can solve it. It also means that if it's rocket science, you can't solve it. Please understand, even rocket science can be solved, right? The reality is that rockets are there and science is there. So what's the big deal? So next time somebody says it's not rocket science, don't believe it. Even rocket science has been solved only by asking these 6 questions. Note down the 6 questions. Whatever is the area of domain, you can solve the problem. Don't allow it to stop you. Last question that people have asked me is age a challenge? Do you need to be an entrepreneur in your 20s, 30s, or 40s? When we launched our product now, I'm 56 years old. This is a time when most people are trying to figure out what to do post-retirement. I said, let's do an FMCG business because I don't have any clue about it. And I want to make a very strong statement here that age, 1, is not a problem. B, I think the older you get, the chances of success actually goes up. And before I did this, I did significant research, and I'm very happy to announce in this room, because I see very few people who are in their 20s, that the older you get, the chances of success are higher. This is actual data. This is not something that I'm saying to keep myself happy. Actual data says that most successful startups in the last 50 years have been by founders who started this in their 30s and 40s and 50s. And there are three reasons for it. First is, I think age brings wisdom, age brings experience. And no amount of energy can compensate for experience and wisdom. The fact that you have already fallen several times and got up is a huge advantage when you're trying to walk again instead of starting and falling for the first time. The second big advantage that age gives you is networks. After you do your work for 20, 30, 35 years, you built a fairly effective network of people, friends, colleagues that you have met as competitors, as colleagues, as business partners, as channel partners, as customers, or anything else in your career. All of those are goodwill that you build which you can use. Irrespective of whatever energy a 25-year-old person brings out of college, networks get built over time. Even in today's age of LinkedIn, networks still get built over time, right? It's easy to get 10,000 connections on LinkedIn for a 25-year-old because you can use technology. The reality is you don't know 9,900 of them, right? So it doesn't matter. But if you're like me and you have 5,000 people, there's a reasonable chance that you know quite a few of them personally. And the value of networks and wisdom is something that can never be replaced. So for all of you who want to continue being an entrepreneur, you don't know, or should you want to start, don't allow age to hold back, don't allow domains to hold back. Enjoy the moment. There's nothing like being an entrepreneur. And the worst thing is if it fails, you can always start up and become an entrepreneur again. Thank you so much.